Alright guys, so we have been talking for a while now about how Israel very clearly at this point wants to expand their war on the people of Gaza to be a regional conflict involving Hezbollah and potentially even Iran. And this latest strike that they just conducted is obviously a massive, massive escalation up the ladder towards that actually becoming a reality. So here from CNN, they say Iran vows revenge as it accuses Israel of deadly airstrike on Syria consulate in a deepening Middle East crisis. So first off, this headline kind of makes it vague as to whether or not it was Israel that did this strike, saying that Iran is accusing them of doing it. It was an Israeli strike. I really don't think that that's even remotely in dispute. But they say the airstrike destroyed the consulate building in the capital of Damascus in Syria, killing at least 7 officials, including Mohammad Reza Zahidi, a top commander in Iran's elite Revolutionary Guards, or the IRGC, as well as a senior commander, Mohammad Hadi Haji Rahimi, according to Iran's foreign ministry. Okay? They say also at least 6 Syrian citizens or civilians were killed, according to Iranian state television on Tuesday. So, I mean, listen, guys, hitting the commander of the IRGC is as dramatic of an escalation as you could possibly ask for. But not only did they kill this guy, but they also went and did it in an embassy building, which is a complete violation of international law. And we'll get to some statements here from U.S. officials in a minute, on this matter. But it's like, I don't see how you could possibly interpret this other than as an act of war against Iran. How would the United States interpret it if Iran was to go and blow up the U.S. embassy in Syria while Anthony Blinken was doing a trip there, or while Lloyd Austin was doing a trip there? The United States would consider that to be an act of war. And same with Israel if it was to happen to them. But they just think that they can act with such complete impunity that they can do this and just get away with it. Or, on the other hand, is the idea, again, that they're doing this intentionally as an escalatory act, knowing that Iran or Iran's proxies in the region will likely retaliate, and then potentially even the United States ends up getting involved. Because who's being put in danger by this kind of a strike? It's mostly U.S. troops in the region, multiple of which previously have been killed by some of these proxies in the region that have been attacking some U.S. bases that still exist in the Middle East for who knows what reason. But we've had U.S. troops who have died as a result of this. So you have Israel launching an escalatory attack against a top IRGC commander and directly putting U.S. troops in harm's way as a result of that. So they continue. They say Zahidi, a former commander of the IRGC's ground forces, air force, and the deputy commander of its operations, is the most high-profile Iranian target killed since then U.S. President Donald Trump ordered the assassination of the IRGC general Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad back in 2020. So it's really similar to what Trump did back then, killing Soleimani. And that was a massive, completely unjustifiable strike that Trump engaged in. I mean, Qasem Soleimani, you don't have to like the guy, but what was he actually doing? He was helping to lead the charge in fighting ISIS. There was no justification. There was no immediate threat to the United States of America from Qasem Soleimani. He just decided to do it because he could, and then he got away with it eventually. But it did almost end up spiraling into a much broader conflict. And same with this as well, especially since it's Israel doing the strike. I mean, to some extent, although I have many criticisms of the government of Iran, obviously, we are extremely lucky, and we're yet to see how this ends up playing out. But so far, we have been extremely lucky that the government of Iran has been as level-headed and as rational of an actor as they have been. It is Israel, and under the Trump administration, Donald Trump as well, who are being incredibly irrational in killing some of these top IRGC commanders. And so, I mean, we'll have to see how they respond, but it's not looking good. They say Iran and Syria accused Israel of authoring the attack, with Tehran warning of a serious response, and the powerful Iran-backed Lebanese militant group Hezbollah saying that the strike will be met with punishment and revenge. Iran also said that it would hold the United States answerable due to its support of Israel. Now, I don't know if the United States had any direct involvement with the bombing of this embassy, but it's not unfair to say that we are fully complicit with everything that Israel is doing right now. Of course we are. They say the Israeli military told CNN that it does not comment on foreign reports. That's a first to me, because I've seen many Israeli politicians and government accounts that have responded to stories that are sparking off in Western countries. But anyways, they say, however, a military spokesperson said that Israel believes the target struck was a military building of the Quds forces. Okay, and they continue. This is Daniel Hagari, right, the rear admiral and the spokesperson for the IDF. He said, according to our intelligence, this is no consulate and this is no embassy. I repeat, this is no consulate and this is no embassy. This is a military building of Quds forces disguised as a civilian building in Damascus. So he's literally trying to do the whole, no, that wasn't a residential building. No, that wasn't a hospital. No, that wasn't a mosque or a church that we just blew up in Gaza. That was a Hamas command and control center. That's what he's trying to do with this strike. Listen, it may be the case that Iran was using this embassy in order to discuss or to plan potential military operations or whatever the case may be, or intelligence operations, but that is not out of the ordinary, okay? Every single country does this. You think the United States doesn't use our embassies overseas that are under a strict protection under international law? You think that we don't use that for intelligence purposes? You think that we don't use that for military purposes in any way, shape, and form? I mean, of course, everybody would do that to some extent. But to turn around and just say that Israel has the authority to unilaterally declare that this consulate, this embassy, is actually not an embassy, it's not a consulate, it's just a military facility, you don't have that fucking right. You don't just get to pull that out of your ass and go and bomb the shit out of it. I mean, another crazy aspect of this, and you can see in this footage here what some of the chaotic aftermath looked like here from Fox News. But I mean, one of the other crazy aspects of this is that here's the embassy of Iran right here, and then literally like one building removed is the embassy of Canada in the same exact location. So, I mean, you were extremely close to bombing a Canadian embassy as you were going about this. I mean, it's obviously in a civilian area here, but they're just arbitrarily, no, it was actually a military building, not an embassy, and so we had the right to strike it, right? And of course, they say 4 unnamed Israeli officials acknowledged that, yes, it was Israel who carried out the attack. And they also say that the United States considers its own embassies and consulates abroad, as well as foreign countries' embassies and consulates in the U.S., to have a special status. According to the U.S. State Department, quote, an attack on an embassy is considered an attack on the country it represents. So in other words, this is effectively, according to the U.S. State Department, an act of war by Israel against Iran. They say a spokesperson for the White House National Security Council said that the U.S. was not involved in the strike and did not know about it ahead of time, and a U.S. official said that information was directly relayed to Tehran. Okay, so maybe the U.S. was involved in it, maybe they weren't involved in it directly, but was this really unpredictable? I mean, Israel has been trying to get us into a war with Iran for years and years and years now, especially under Netanyahu. Since October 7th, he's been using, the war in order to try to justify expanding it, so that he can stay in power. The longer that the war goes on, especially if it escalates towards a broader regional conflict, the more likely that he is going to be able to hold on to his grip in power, and that he won't have to face any sort of consequences inside of Israel, criminally or otherwise. And so, I mean, to some extent, it doesn't even really matter whether or not the U.S. had direct involvement in this. If Iran believes that you had direct involvement in this, or if any sort of proxies in the region, or militias or militant groups in the region believe that the United States had a hand in this in any way, and then they launch attacks on U.S. troops, well, it doesn't really matter whether or not you had an involvement in it. I mean, the core of this obviously comes back to Gaza. It comes back to what the United States is supporting in a genocide of the Palestinian people. That's what this comes back to, in the same way that it comes back to that on the Houthis, right? The way that the U.S. media talks about the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea is as if like it just sprang out of nowhere, that it has no connection to what's happening in Gaza whatsoever. They're just doing this because they're bad, and so we have to go in and we have to bomb Yemen because they're bad and we're good, etc., etc. But it's like, no, if there was a ceasefire in place, the U.S. troops in the region would not be nearly, at as high of a risk of these kinds of attacks from proxies in the region. If the war in Gaza was over, if there was a ceasefire, then the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea would stop. This is not that complicated, guys. But the U.S. would rather stand by Israel as they commit war crime after war crime after war crime, and as they bomb, world central, kitchen aid workers, and then destroy hospital complexes and all of that. They'd rather stand by Israel shoulder to shoulder as they do all of this and starve the Palestinian people, rather than just apply pressure on Israel to stop. And, Israel is still planning on continuing forward with the invasion of Rafah, which is going to worsen the situation somehow dramatically from where it already is right now, which is obviously at catastrophic levels. And the U.S. is just completely, enabling this. I mean, we also had Israeli strikes in Syria that are separate to the ones we were just discussing that killed dozens, including soldiers, Syrian soldiers, and Hezbollah militants, according to Israel. And so you have this massive escalation not only with Iran by striking the IRGC commander, but also with Hezbollah and also with Syrian soldiers. And, in response, they say Israeli strikes in Lebanon kill 16, militant rockets kill one Israeli as cross-border violence soars. So, I mean, we have this tit-for-tat back and forth that has been going on for months and months and months now on the border with Lebanon, and that's heating up continuously as time goes on. More and more people are dying. The rocket fire is getting more intensified as time goes on. And then we have Israel launching widespread attacks in Syria, as well as in Lebanon, and then also going and targeting a fucking consulate building, an embassy building in Syria to take out one of the highest ranking members of the IRGC. So, I mean, listen, guys, it's not an exaggeration to say that a broader regional war is on the immediate horizon. I mean, I don't know how Iran is going to directly respond to this in the immediate term. Maybe we do end up with more strikes on U.S. troops who are in the region. And we end up with dead troops because of what Israel just did. I don't know how they're going to respond in the immediate term. But in the short to long term, or the short to medium term, it looks like Israel is just on a warpath. They just want this to expand into a broader conflict and to drag the United States to defend them if Iran did decide to respond, or if Hezbollah decided to launch a massive offensive. And you best believe that, Joe Biden absolutely would do that. If Hezbollah launches a massive attack from the north, or if Iran launches some sort of attack on Israel, the United States is not just going to let that be or let Israel fend for themselves. We're going to have American troops that are directly put in harm's way because of that. For what fucking reason? Because we have this rogue, genocidal state actor that is going around and pissing off everybody in the region intentionally to try to escalate? This is our close ally that is somehow aligned with U.S. interests? No, I mean, it's utterly ridiculous at this point. So obviously we're going to have to stay, closely tracking this and how this develops over the next day, over the next week, or whatever the case may be. But it's definitely not heading towards a good direction.